This is Harlem by Langston Hughes. The community of Harlem is a neighborhood in New York City that became very popular during the 1920s and 30s as sort of a center for African American art. There were clubs and there were theaters and museums that all used the opportunity to expose people to art and music and theater that celebrated the African American experience. Langston Hughes was a resident of Harlem during that time of the 20s and 30s, and he was a poet, and he is a very famous American poet. And he often writes about the Black or the African American experience during that time. Now, Harlem is a poem that was written as a collection of poems, okay? What was referred to as a montage, which means collection. And this collection of poems was meant to be read like all at one time, like a book almost, okay? And it talks about the experience of African Americans living in Harlem during any particular time period. Now, the poem was written in 1951. In 1951, the Civil Rights Act had not come into play yet, nor had the Voting Rights Act. And so we were about 14 years at least ahead of that, because the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. So African Americans were experiencing discrimination, joblessness, because they were often not hired for jobs, and other social injustice problems such as police brutality. So sort of the dream for the entire community was that they be considered equal. So they had this community dream. But because the laws were not yet in place that protected them and gave them equal rights, this dream was postponed, you might say, and wasn't allowed to come true. So that is what Langston Hughes writes about in Harlem. I'm going to play for you an audio, and while I do, I want you to make sure that you are familiar enough with the Kami tools to be able to annotate with us.
Harlem, Dream Deferred by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode?
Okay, so that is an audio of the poem. We're going to return to our poem and begin our annotations. The word deferred is at the end of line 1. And when something is deferred, that means that it is postponed or delayed. And you should take notes on your document as well. Now, when a dream such as the Harlem community has is deferred and delayed over and over again, I would imagine that the people whose dream it is become very frustrated, and that will come into play later. Okay, but the dream they seem to have is of equality and justice. Now, Langston Hughes gives us some very vivid descriptions suggesting what might happen if a dream is deferred. Okay, he uses similes over and over again to create an image for his reader of what it may be like if a dream is deferred. We're going to add some notes here. So we have similes. Okay, comparisons between two things using like or as. So when he speaks at the beginning of this group of lines of does it dry up, it refers to the dream. And if something is drying up like a raisin in the sun, it is becoming shriveled and dried up. He goes on to ask, or does it fester like a sore and then run? So he is there comparing, okay, a dream deferred or a delayed dream to an infected wound. And then he suggests, does it stink like rotten meat or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? These are very negative images. Notice how his word choice doesn't suggest anything like light and bright, okay? He uses negative images to almost like prove his point, okay, of the injustice that people are experiencing. When you get down toward the later part of the poem, you see two lines that are set alone. Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Okay, this suggests the burden. Okay, or responsibility. The burden of responsibility or the weight that people feel felt by the people of Harlem. Because I'm certain that adults would feel a sense of responsibility to the future generations, okay, to try to improve the community and their lives. And when you're unable to do that, it's a heavy responsibility. And then there is this very last line. Okay, I'm going to mark it in red just because I feel like it's significant to the words themselves. Okay, notice that it is italicized. Okay, the words are in italics. Okay, usually that indicates that it is something to be emphasized. All right. Here also we have it as the conclusion of the poem, or does it explode? All right. Langston Hughes is suggesting, okay, that frustration and anger, okay, may boil over. Because I'm sure people were just completely frustrated with the lack of improvement in their community with how people were treated. And we do know that in 1935 and 1943, there were riots in Harlem that were triggered by segregation, unemployment, and police brutality in the black community. And that was a big influence on Langston Hughes. So now it's your turn. In Schoology, you're going to find a poetry response that you're being asked to do. And I want you to write about your own dream, okay? Describing a personal dream that you have that may not yet have been realized. It may be an individual dream. It may be a cooperative dream, like one that takes a team. It could be a family dream, a universal dream, like one that's for the world, or one that is a future dream, like for when you grow up a little more. After you submit your writing, I want you to upload an image that represents your dream. Now, you will need to make sure that in Schoology you have selected the little square with the arrows so that this document is in its own tab. The Google form is in its own tab. You will make a list of obstacles, and of course you're going to include your name and the period you come to class. Okay, make sure you have submitted your Kami doc as well as using the submit button at the bottom of the Google form. Please email me for any questions.